are many films for teenagers these days, but not that many films that are about them in a meaningful way. So I thought I'd start by asking Theo if there are any films that have spoken to you, excepting of course Little Men, that are about teenagers.
Right off the top of my mind, none of them are really coming.
There's an absence. I mean, I think that was something that I was aware of.
Oh, well, there is 400 Blows.
Right, yeah. We have to go a little far back to find one, don't you? Yeah. What were you saying?
Which is also, I believe, an inspiration to this film. And 400 Blows I find is very interesting because, like how you tried to do it, documents life. It's not trying to find, it's not exactly trying to find events. It's trying to find emotional connections, which I find is very interesting, quite moving, in fact.
Ira, how did you light on this subject matter for your sixth feature, right?
Mm-hmm. Sixth. I had made two films in New York in the last few years. One was called Keep the Lights On, which is about two 20-year-old men, and then I made a film called Love is Strange about two older men, and it seemed like it was time to focus on a different generation. All my films, in a way, are about generations and these kind of questions about parents and children and what it is to be one and the other. And I, on the other hand, have a number of films about teenagers and young people that I love, including The 400 Blows, but also movies like The World of Henry Orient with Peter Sellers, a couple of films by Ozu that were influential to this movie, a film by Jean Eustache called My Little Loves. A lot of movies that I think really speak to the beauty of that time in a cinematic way. So we try to make those.
Yeah, the Ozu films were a sort of logline starting point for you, right?
Yes.
I jumped off from.
Yeah.
Why those films? I mean, they're basically the same story, I suppose. But what captured you about that plot suggestion?
I think that there was a level of humor in the story that also spoke to the real disconnect between children and parents and children. So I think Ozu has a very light way of talking about serious things, which I think is attractive to me. He's also pretty good with plot. Even though there's not necessarily a lot of it, there's not an absence of plot. There is something happens, and then the story is propelled from that. And in this case, these two boys stop talking to their parents, and that causes some drama, and it begins to kind of brew underneath.
Theo, Ira has a reputation for sending his actors out on quote-unquote dates before the film starts to get to know each other. Did you have a kind of get-to-know-you session with Michael Barbieri?
Yes, in fact, we had a few cases where that happened. Some of which were arranged by you, Ira, but some of them were just kind of friendly get-togethers. The first time I believe we met, we went out to see the new movie Pixels, which was fun. But then after that, we just skated in the park for a while. Where I was currently staying, we were very close to Prospect Park, so it was really nice, and we got to know each other. I found out his interests, he found out mine, and he truly is his character. I mean, he's charismatic, he's outgoing, he's friendly, and he's just really, really good at connecting with people. And I thought he's a very interesting person.
I set those things up. I mean, it's interesting because it's interesting that movie happened because I said to Michael, "What would you do with a friend if you had one in town and you didn't know everywhere? Be like, go to the movies around the corner." So that's what they did. They went to the movies.
You mentioned how similar Michael is to his character. How close are you to yours?
I find that there's aspects of my character that are similar to me. As I believe that everyone has a bit of themselves that is so like a bit different than them. Like, for instance, there is a side of myself that's a little bit more internal. This character I find is he doesn't like change, but he likes opportunities. He believes in kind of the visions that he has, and he has very interesting views of the world. I find like the green sky with yellow stars. He has a very vivid imagination. And, I, kind of tapped into more of my creative side. Like, I myself make my own films, so I kind of took that and reshaped it a bit to create his interests as well.
One of the things that was striking me about the film is that it starts out establishing Jake as being this kind of odd man out within his peer group, and then all of these things happen over the course of the film, and then at the end of the film, he still seems like a bit of an odd man out, and yet something has changed, something subtle has shifted.
He's more sure of himself, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how you saw that. Is that because of what Tony has been able to give him? What is it that Tony is able to give to Jake that makes that friendship click?
Well, like I said before, Tony and Michael both are very charismatic and easy to connect with. It's a friendship, right from the beginning. They connect really, really well. And through, and I think this is true for myself and the character Jake, through Michael and Tony, I'm able to connect with other people. I'm able to connect, with, his friends or other people. And I think in that case, I'm able to be more sure of myself around him because he gives me this sort of confidence, I feel. And then, after the whole entire, terrible experience, I'm able to walk away with the feeling that, life may not be always, fair or good, but there's certainly moments of it that can be quite amazing. And I think just my character, having more sureness of himself. What he learns from Tony is to be sure of himself, to be, there and to be proud of your decisions. And I feel personally that that's what happens in the end. He's more sure of himself, thanks to Tony and thanks to this, experience. And he comes at it with a more positive attitude.
And Ira, you've talked about this film being perhaps your most rigorous film. I wonder if you could talk about what you mean by that, and maybe if that has anything to do with that shape that I'm talking about of the opening and closing scenes as well.
What shape?
Well, just that we're seeing it very much, I think, from Jake's point of view.
Right.
And he's sort of surrounded by a peer group, but we're very kind of locked into him.
Well, a lot of what I would call the rigor has to do with aesthetic choices that were made, and particularly between myself and Oscar Duran, who was the cinematographer. We had a few films that were very influential to us, and we stayed the course, so we were not shooting, we were shooting what we needed, not what would make us safe. And that often meant less shots, less coverage. This film was shot in the medium, primarily, and I think that that puts a lot of pressure on both the editing and on the performances. The editing, because you need to create an emotion without maybe enforcing it through a cut.
Sure.
And the performances, because there's something very simple. I think of this film as a very modernist film. That the images are clean, and that the images in a way are like sort of, they radiate a kind of whiteness about them, if that makes sense. And to me, that meant that I needed to be very precise about how to shoot the film, how to light the film, how to write the film.
When you talk about shooting in the medium shot and maybe using longer takes and not cutting in as much, it also brings to mind for me theater,
Yes.
and the whole notion of a theater kid is kind of an important element of the film as well. Is theater part of your background? What was your acting experience prior to being cast?
This was my first feature film, and before that, I was, primarily in school plays, and was in some, theater in the community, especially with a group called Noise Within. I was also part of Inner City Shakespeare. So I did do a lot of theater beforehand. But then I started doing my own, little films, my own independent films that I do. I think that was my first introduction to being in front of the camera.
father makes films as well, right?
Yes, he does.
So, was it through watching him that you got your interest in doing this? What was your path to finding yourself with an agent and then making an audition tape? Because you cast video off tape, right?
Well, both of my parents are very supportive, and they're really supportive of what I do, my choices, and I really believe that if I said one day that, Mom and Dad, I'm not interested in filmmaking or acting anymore, I want to be a lawyer, they'd be fine. They would be, completely supportive of me. I find that I found acting and screenwriting on my own terms, but I found that they've really helped to guide me through those times when I'm trying to help me develop. But they've always, given me my artistic space.
And Ira, what was it that you saw on that tape that convinced you Theo was the one?
It was one of the more natural auditions I've ever seen, really. It was like we discovered the documentary that had been made about the character written. So it was very real. It felt totally embodied. And that was true from that moment on. So there was never a real distance between Theo and the language of the film. So I think what was interesting was that I found when I started to cast there was a big difference. Kids change a lot, 11, 12, 13, and sort of realizing that I wanted two boys who were sort of just pre-adolescents, and what that did in terms of questions of sexuality in the film, which in a way removed those questions. This is a kind of romanticized friendship, and I think that was there was just like, oh, when you're making a film about boys, it matters if they're 11 or 11 and a half or 12, or if their voice has changed, or if they have self-consciousness, and it was all very subtle.
Right. Yeah, and I imagine one could go about that in a number of ways in terms of talking about that material and the characters. Were there overt conversations about what Theo was feeling about the relationship, or was it just sort of intuitive?
I tried to talk less than I'm talking here.
Sure.
Though what I do with my actors, and that includes the kids, is we read through the script together and we make sure it's all very clear, but we hope that the heavy lifting is done without language, in a way, by the script itself and by the situation. So I wouldn't say we talk too much. I would say we talk the most specifically about the scene towards the end of the film where things have kind of gone not well, and there's a response. And we kind of worked to chart the emotions in a more specific way for that scene. In general, I think if you cast well and you write the script, a strong script, the work is done.
So had you ever worked with kids to this extent before?
I had worked with Charlie Tahan on Love is Strange, who was 15 at the time, so a few years older. I mean, what I have found in these kids' or further proof is that whether you're talking about kids or adults or non-actors or actors, it's all kind of the same as a director. You either cast well or you haven't. The person either fits the role, and there's nothing you can tell them that's gonna make it better if they're not right. And I found that these kids, what was interesting is I could actually have real dialogue about what was coming off the screen, and that we could discuss things as if they were in their, as if they were Alfred Molina.
Right.
It wasn't so different.
I imagine you've probably worked with some adult actors who were more juvenile than
I hate to say it, but because I can do it as a blanket statement, these two kids were easier than any adult actor I've worked with.
So one other thing I was curious about, Theo, since you are a filmmaker, as you mentioned, is if you got any of a film education from Ira, if he was recommending pictures to you that you needed to watch, or if you were studying his technique.
Well, I truly feel that Ira has been a mentor for me as a filmmaker, and also as an actor in some cases. Like you gave me very important information that I'll continue thinking about throughout my career, which is less is more. Never push anything out. Just trust the emotions themselves and just let it happen as it is, which is very useful, wise information. And I think that, Ira and on the cinematographer, Oscar, were also able to, kind of teach me a bit about filmmaking as it is and storytelling even. And it was very interesting. I was, annoying Oscar with a bunch of questions about the Alexa camera. But, I do think that Ira has been a big part of filmmaking for me.
Given that you don't do rehearsals per se, what was involved in building the family unit with Greg Kinnear and Jennifer Ely? Was that again intuitive and kind of just trust them and let them go, or was
Well, they're
that,
both parents.
yeah.
Greg has 3 daughters. Jennifer has 2 sons. Two sons. So I think they were familiar with. What's interesting about their performances together is you really believe the family history and the couple history with these two, and that's kind of the magic that happens between actors. I think Greg very quickly understood the plot and drama of his own character, which was a man sort of confronting the loss of his father, and then what that means about who he is for himself and how he becomes a man himself. And I think Greg understood the arc of that. Jennifer managed to bring in so much. You feel that she has a whole life outside of the house, and yet we never see it, but we totally buy it, which is really interesting.
You reminded me also of the title, Little Men. Originally, the title was Silent Treatment. Right?
Yes.
How did you make the decision to change the title, and why?
I think throughout this process, I was sort of negotiating in my head between making a film. I wanted to make a film for kids, and yet everyone kept telling me there is no market in American cinema for serious films for kids that aren't adventure films or animated films. And I kept resisting that in some ways. The Silent Treatment was, in some ways, it was like a title like The Parent Trap. It was a high concept title to a low concept film. Ultimately, I ended up making a film like all my films, which it's an art film and it's a nuanced sort of family drama, and it just didn't feel like it needed that kind of conceptual commercial gloss. I also like the novelistic element of Little Men. It sort of refers to Louis May Alcott and those kind of stories of everyday life, whether they be 1900 or 2016.
Yeah. Well, you should have called it The Goonies 2.
Goonies 2,
yeah.
yeah.
The market covered, right? No, I'm kidding. We've talked a lot about family and the family unit and the relationship between the two friends. What about the larger sense of community? What did you hope to convey about, say, our relationships with neighbors and what responsibility we owe them?
I don't know if we owe them anything, because I don't think the film takes that stance. I think that, I moved to New York in 1988, and I came from college, and I was the white, kind of overly educated college kid who was moving to a neighborhood that was primarily Italian. My street was Dominican, and somehow all of us from these different economic and social backgrounds were supposed to get along or not, and the differences were very pronounced, and some people got to stay and some people didn't, and I feel I guess I find it dramatically compelling and emotionally rich how money affects everyday life. I guess I don't ever try to use the film to tell people how to behave. I would just say that even in this room, there's conflict and class going on around the difference between our experience.
One of the other films that you've talked about as a reference point was Little Fugitive.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why that was and how it informed the way you shot this film.
Well, I think that movie, Morris Ingle understood that one of his jobs as a filmmaker was to be there for that child and to attend to it with his camera and to enjoy the pleasures of it. And there's a kind of freedom to being a kid that you want the film to convey. I will tell you that we were shooting the scene in the museum, and a woman came up to son had seen a sign about this shoot, and he wanted to be an extra, so he was an extra in the film, and that her father was Mars Hill. And that, for me, it was a very special moment because it was kind of this blessing from someone who had made a film which had been so meaningful to me. That film, by the way, was meaningful to a lot of people. It was sort of, the French New Wave got a lot out of that in general.
Yeah. Theo, looking ahead, what are your plans? What's your kind of ideal at this point? What do you imagine your future to be? What do you hope?
What I would say about my future as it is, I don't really want to be stuck doing one thing. I mean, right now, at this point, I'm not only doing acting and filmmaking. I'm doing music right now. I'm doing my own athletic, stuff, tricking, and I'm trying to, and I said music already.
It's tricky.
It's like to put it into, I guess, simple words, backflips, front flips, such.
Did you know that term?
No. I thought I'd look it up later.
But I really just want to widen my, my knowledge and creativity. And as long as I'm doing something creative and something that I can take all my experiences and lay them out in that job, whether it be music or, acting or filmmaking, I want my experiences to show, and I want, my creativity to be there. And as long as I'm being creative and being who I am, I think I'll just be happy.
I know, Ira, you're working on a project for HBO about Montgomery Clift. I don't know if you ever know when you're working for HBO how sure a thing it is, but are you developing the script right now, or how far along is that project?
We've finished the script, and they have to decide if they're going to make it. So, we'll see.
Can you talk a little bit about what sort of angle you're taking on Clift's life?
It's 14 to 45.
Wow.
So which was when he died. So it's this age to death. So it's a macro film. Of course, we focused on a number of characters. I would say, Raging Bull was a big influence in the writing of the script because we were looking at a man who had greatness, but also enormous number of internal problems. So that challenge between those two things was interesting to me. And it's built around a production of The Glass Menagerie that Montgomery Clift did when he was in his later years. There was this a radio play. So it was a point in which all his acting was through his voice because his body was giving up.
Right. And is there a particular source work that you adapted, or?
No, we went through everything, including a lot of archives, and found some incredible bits and pieces that have been constructed. I mean, we constructed a fictional character whose name was Montgomery Clift, who I actually feel now has real life as a person. So I'm excited about it.
And are there plans being laid for another New York feature?
There's plans being laid